All right, we are live. I am so stoked for this episode because I get to podcast with a close friend of mine, someone I've met freaking 12 years ago in a completely different world than what we're in right now. And so it'll be great to reconnect in terms of getting updates in terms of what he's doing, how he transitioned from W2, pre W2, going to college, all the way to into W2 as an engineer, and then out of it using real estate as the vehicle. And so I'm so stoked to interview you today, Ryan. Thanks for coming, dude.
Yeah, awesome. And thanks for having me on here, guys. Yeah, I got to thank you for, even being here. When we met for lunch, I think in Arizona there, and you told me about Sub 2 and kind of got me into this community. So it's been a wild ride since, was that a year? That was about 2 years ago. And so, yeah,
I forgot about that. You're right. You drove up toward my house. We met for lunch, and I was enthusiastic about what I was doing because we were in the middle of it. Yep. And you were asking questions. Oh yeah, we had burgers. That's right. And then you joined. And so I was like, heck yeah, man. And you're doing awesome things. It's really cool. And one thing that about you that I've shared this story so many times to paint the picture to a lot of people who are still working either an hourly job or a true W-2 or all these different things about how to get started in anything, let alone real estate, is that when I met you, you and I were at Oregon State University, and in our engineering program. But on the side, every weekend, we would always hang out. You and I would always do different things. And you would always have older, like a 96 to 2000 Toyota Tacoma, a very specific year that you were flipping. And many times, which is hilarious, you were doing creative finance before that was even happening because you wouldn't even sign the back of the title. You would buy the truck on Friday, wash it, replace a belt, sell it by Sunday. And you'd get calls from sellers of like, what just happened?
Yep.
Wild, dude.
Yeah. We got called out one time in a restaurant. We saw a guy after we sold the vehicle, and he called us out like right in front of everybody. And it was like, we paid you exactly what you wanted for the vehicle. We didn't even barter on price. Like, how can you be mad at us for reselling it after fixing up? We just knew what a vehicle was worth. So we were, essentially wholesaling vehicles in college. That's kind of how I paid my way through college.
That's incredible.
So cool. So cool. Yeah. So you and I met in engineering school. And so both of us graduated from there back in, 2015, 2016 range. And both of us kind of went off and did our thing for a bit. Both of us got engineering jobs and whatnot. And then you moved to Portland. But let's kind of back up and talk about your journey and how you even chose to kind of go to college to get that degree, and how that kind of led into what I want to kind of get to is how your vision and your mindset got you to, I want to go get my engineering degree, or if that was the case originally, and then getting into your true W-2, how that's kind of bled into this real estate thing that you're currently doing.
Yeah. Like anybody, some people that I know, like I graduated high school, had no idea what I wanted to do. I'd been kind of told, go to college. That's the path forward. So I started college. I started in welding classes. I did 2 quarters of welding and had no idea what I wanted to do. About that time, my dad introduced me to some electricians at the mill, said, hey, join the local union, put your application in. So I did that. I also applied for the non-union electrician, got the non-union electrician job first, which is driving to Portland every day, which was awful. But then the union called about 3 weeks later after getting that non-union job. And so I joined the local union, which was, my backyard. That was a great career as an electrician. Along the way, about 3 years in, I hit, 2008. So I had about a year off, and then talked to a lot of like the older guys in the trades. And they're like, hey, if you're smart enough to go back to college, like you should definitely make that jump. I'm like, why would I go back to college? I'm making, great amount of like good money at that time. I was probably in the 30s, working up to, I think the top at that time was like $41 an hour. I'm like, man, if I get to $41 an hour, I've hit the, the jackpot. And so then about, I think it was around 2012-ish is when I'd met my wife, Kendra, and we'd been dating, and she kind of was getting to the end of her college as a reporter. And there was 3 different places where she could get jobs. Well, Bend, Oregon was one of them. And she was like, I have to go to one of these places to get my first job. And so if we want to continue, having this relationship and getting married potentially, do you want to do that? And I was very like, no, I'm small town. I want to stay here. Like I have no plans of ever moving away. But I was like, you know what? Like, I'm going to listen to what these guys said, and I'm going to go chase something different and go after that, that next stage that I thought was, out of reach. There was a bit of fear in that moment of, security. So I got one journeyman paycheck as an electrician. I was working 6 10s. So I had one day off a week to pretty much catch up on chores, wash dishes, get groceries for the next week. But it felt good to I was driving 3.5 hours to there and back each day just to get to the job site down in Hillsboro.
Wow.
So it wasn't a fun time in life. I was making a lot of money, but I wasn't happy. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to take that next step. Got that one journeyman paycheck, quit that week, and started college the next week at summer quarter in Bend, Oregon at OSU. I initially went there thinking I wanted to do finance, like personal finance. I kind of had a goal wanted to help people. I was always good with my money, saving things or saving up my money. And so that was kind of the direction I went. Well, when I got there, they were like, well, with your background and you're great at math, you should jump into our energy systems engineering program. And I was like, man, engineers, like they're super smart. Like that's way above me. Like I'm just this, small town guy. Like, no, I can't do that. Like I had heard about the homework with engineers. I'm like, I'm not doing that.
It's interesting along the journey. I'll interrupt you here. It's interesting along the journey. What I'm hearing is like, you had this pre-existing identity, brought upon you from your childhood, your experiences, your parents, your family, your friends, all these things that created this mythical or theoretical ceiling that it took someone you worked with alongside pushing you to, hey, you should go look at this, which is college. And along the way, it sounds like you had multiple moments of like, okay, you need pushes from your wife that has to get a job there. All these different things that are like pushing you to go do the thing. And even when you get there, when you originally enroll, they're pushing you to do something completely different. And you create that same mindset pops back in of like, I'm not good enough to be an engineer. I'm not smart enough to do this. I'm not all these different things along the way, but yet you still push through. What do you think was that like along the way, like these mental hurdles for you, whether it be childhood, whether it be different things that got you over those mental hurdles to like push past your limiting beliefs?
I think it was as a kid, like growing up. So my parents built 3 houses growing up. My parents, like the first house they built, my dad would go to Alaska. He'd come back with cash and he'd use that money to build on that house. Well, they essentially built that over 4 years. They had a paid off house when they were like 25, 28, I think it was. And so like I watched that cycle. That was when I was really young, but then they did it 2 more times. And so I kind of watched my dad. He had no experience building homes, but he would go help people that were building homes and learn the different trades along the way. And so when I was growing up, I was like, gosh, my dad knows how to build houses. Like this is crazy. And he's doing this thing that, and this is on the side of, he's doing his other job. He was a millwright. And so I think it's kind of that, like he was always doing the next big thing.
Okay.
Buying property a little bit and then, building houses with really no help from others, just kind of slowly building it after work. And so I think I get a little bit of that from him and my mom, just kind of never really living beyond their means but with that comes, the smaller mindset. But I think that's what kind of pushed me to always, when I get comfortable with something, I'm always pushing for that next, what's the next thing I can go after?
Yeah.
And so it's been like, I've got like a pattern. I was kind of running through it. Like it's literally a pattern in my life of once I get comfortable with something, I'm like, what's that next step that makes me feel uncomfortable? Because it can be an addicting, I don't know if it's addicting or it's like, I kind of always come back. I think it's what truly makes me happy.
That's great.
Yeah. It's a bit of risk and gambling. That's what I've noticed. Like everybody that I've noticed that has been pretty successful in the realm of real estate investing and business buying and scaling, they have a propensity to treat it a little bit like a gambling table. Like it's Vegas. It's the Vegas for them. And it doesn't have to be irresponsible, but there's an element of risk that's undeniable. And it's something that keeps feeding you and pushing you forward. I noticed that too with myself, where I kept putting myself in positions where I would very quickly go, this is not it. And I knew that. And it was time to quick, like I move fast. So I have a feeling you probably do the same thing. And you're like, all right, I'm done. What are we doing next? This is not going to work. And it's not that thing like goes into the background and it never matters or was never part of the journey, but it's almost like I grew out of that, or it never really was the right fit. So it's time to move on, So that's really cool though, that you are aware of that, because I think that really successful business folks have a very high level of self-awareness and extreme accountability.
Yep.
And that's what keeps us going.
Yeah, and it's a calculated risk you're taking too. So it's not just like, oh, we're just jumping into this. And right. I think you get to a level of comfort with, like say you start a new business or you bought your first single family home. I mean, I remember that my first single family home was just, I was like, man, this is black box. I have no idea. Super nervous about what could go wrong. But you soon figure out that, okay, well, I got to figure out how to do these leases. I've never done leases before. I'm going to figure this lease out. What happens if something goes wrong? I got to figure out how to overcome that. And so there's these little stages where now I look back at the things I worried about, and those problems seem so small, but to somebody that's just starting out, each one of those little problems are huge. They're their Mount Everest at that point. Like buying a single family home for somebody who has no investments is their Mount Everest. And so it's not to discredit that, but it's like, yeah, as you go along, that will become your new norm, writing a lease. That'll become like brushing your teeth in the morning, or, going to get tabs for your car. It'll just become the norm. You'll be used to it. And then you kind of move on to the next problem in your life, and it'll be more stressful. You're kind of pushing that envelope of what your comfort zone is. But I think in life, you always should be pushing that comfort zone, and it ties directly back to happiness. And it could be, like you really like risk, but what I think is what I found is you always have to be pushing what's comfortable in your life, because if you just get comfortable, I feel like your happiness will decline over time, because we're built-in creatures to where we have to be pushing ourselves to do something. And a lot of people find that through their job. A lot of things, it's your job, it's your 9 to 5. I look at life like you have like a baseline happiness. And when people are at their job, they're below that baseline happiness. A lot of times it's not what they want to be doing. And so at the end of the week, they get to the end of the week and they're like, oh, it's the weekend. And they think that weekend makes them happy. I don't think it's not the weekend that makes them happy and being away from that job, that time off. It's the fact that you're doing something that you don't want to do throughout the week. And then you get to the point where, I'm trying to rephrase this how I wanted to say it. You're getting to you're essentially doing something you don't want to do throughout the week. And then you get to the end, and now it's something you've built up that happiness essentially throughout the week doing something you don't want to. So during the week, you're lowering that baseline. And then at the weekend, you're doing, if you could have the weekend as your whole life, it just becomes your new norm, and it's not something special anymore, I guess.
Well, I think too, like my previous employer, my boss, excuse me. I remember having the conversation when I left that firm, the engineering firm. One of the things that he said was it kind of was interesting to hear was, and he's been with that company for 20 years, was he's never once considered leaving simply because of the fear of having to start up with another firm and another manager, another boss, another thing. And so he's gotten to this like groove of just, this is the norm. Like I'm comfy, I'm cushy here and all these things. And so he's not challenging himself. He's not pushing himself. He's not testing anything and doing anything. He's just, here's Friday, here's Monday. Let's just keep it moving,
100%.
So we went through college, and you're in your engineering program. And so now you're studying to become an engineer. Where was your mindset there in terms of where your vision was moving forward after that?
So yeah, at that point, my Mount Everest, I wanted a job when I got done with college that was, I could work from home, work that 40 hours a week from home to where I could be, home with my kids. So that was my ideal job, to where I could be there, in the mornings when they wake up, and maybe at lunchtime see them a little bit. That was my new vision that I wanted to get after college and get that job. And so that was my vision at that point.
Okay. And so interesting. Okay. But yeah. And so your family has some real estate ties to that. So you're graduating college. I think we graduated in 2015, 2016 range. So 9-10 years ago. And you went off and you worked as an electrical engineer. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So you worked with Eaton, I think it was. And how long, I guess, from graduation when did you begin like that real estate? When was your first real estate endeavor? Was it post-graduation, during graduation, or during school? When was your first inkling into real estate?
So yeah, in 2013, right after we moved to Bend, we rented an apartment in Bend. I actually did like pretty much my first house hacking kind of in Bend. We rented an apartment I think we rented it for $675, and we got a roommate and we posted on Craigslist and for $500. So we had a roommate we rented a 3-bedroom. He rented one of the rooms for $500. And so we were paying $175 for our apartment at the time.
That's insane. I do not understand. That's crazy. Even then, a 3-bedroom apartment for that cheap?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And so it was a fun time, but I wanted to buy a home. I had bought in property when I was 19. My dad kind of pushed me to buy some property. So I bought some property on seller finance when I was 19. Didn't make any money on this property because, we went through the dip. This was right before 2008 happened. Property was just starting to make a comeback in 2013. So I was like, I'm going to sell this property and use that as my down payment for a house. So my mind at that time had no creative financing. It was, I have to get a down payment, large down payment, go buy a home. That's the only way I knew how to do it. So I sold the property, kind of broke even. I actually think I lost a little bit because I developed it, got it ready for a housing site. And then I think I bought it for 40 and sold it for 38. But it gave me that little bit of a down payment to go buy a home. So Kendra was working at the time as a reporter, first job, not making much money. So we didn't qualify to go purchase a home. So now I'm like, okay, so what's the next, how can I fix this? Well, talked to her parents and said, hey, if I provide a down payment for a home, will you guys co-sign on the house for us? And you guys have a certain percentage ownership in the home. And they're like, yeah, we'd be down to do that. And so we split it 60-40. So essentially how I worked that out is whatever was left after the down payment, say I put 20% down, which is I think about what I did. Because I think we bought our house for $193,000. I put 20% down and then we split the remaining 80% equity, 40-60 split. And that allowed us to get into a home. House payment was, I think, $918 a month. So okay. it was like, man, so we crossed that hurdle, got into that position, got a house. Now we own something.
Okay. And then when did you make your first investment purchase, like your first non-primary investment purchase?
Yep. That was right after college. So okay. we moved from Bend over to Tigard or Portland area. That's when I actually learned how to do a little bit of rental stuff, because I actually rented to one of our classmates, Justin, and he rented a house, and he was renting. This all kind of transpired in a very short period of time. We were like, okay, now we're moving. We didn't know we were getting jobs. And then that month window, it's like, okay, we're moving to Portland. Crap, we got this house. Let's rent it out. So I rented to Justin, I think, for $1,600 a month, and our mortgage was $918. And so then those first couple payments started coming in. So that was kind of our first investment, but not like, we're buying an investment property. But I started to see those passive checks coming in, and that's when I was like, man, this is awesome. And that kind of pushed me into, I want to read more books about how this works. And I was driving a lot as an engineer when I started out. I was driving like over to Boardman, Oregon, and doing a lot of driving. So I started listening to Audible books. And that's why I would highly recommend to people, if you're doing a lot of driving in your work, don't use that time listening to the radio. Listen to books that are like, making you grow mentally and pushing your boundaries as far as learning goes. But that's where, so I started looking at other properties like rentals, read Brandon Turner's book. A lot of those books just kind of like teach you how how it all works, get better at it. Well, then I heard that 2% rule, and that's kind of messed me up a little bit. Like that purchase a property, you should be renting it for 2% of what your purchase price was. And I was like analyzing properties, and as an engineer, I'm over analyzing everything. I'm like, man, nothing you can do this on. So I'm looking and looking. Finally heard somebody one day, it's just like, don't get into analysis paralysis. Just get your first deal. And even if you're barely breaking even or just making a little bit of money, look at that like going to college. That's your college. You're learning, you're getting into an investment that you can start, you learn those little things that you think are a black box right now and that are, out of reach for you. And that was a big turning point. So I got on the MLS, I found a property in Battleground. I think I paid $250 for it. So my mortgage was somewhere around, I think $1,400. And I think I rented it out for about $1,700. So, with CapEx and vacancy, I wasn't really making much money, and I got 25% down. So
all your money's tied up.
Yeah. And so let's back up a little bit on that. I guess we rented that house to Justin for a year, and I was going back. So I was still of the mindset you need 25% down on a home. And so I was like, how am I going to get 25% down for an investment property? That'd be on that other house. That'd be like 65 grand on a house to put down on a $250,000 loan. So I'm like, I'm going to sell my Bend home. So we ended up selling that Bend home and then taking that cash. Didn't know about 1031s at that time. So just actually we lived there. So other than that 1 year Justin was there, we got the, $500,000. So took that money, and that's what we bought that Battleground home with is that money. And, like I said, wasn't making a lot, but it got me out of my analysis paralysis of just looking at a bunch of different deals. It wasn't a home run, but it created a hurdle that got me over like, okay, so now I'm getting into management. I'm getting into, some of the other things, dealing with tenants. Justin was super easy because we kind of knew him and kind of friends, but this is different. I didn't know these people. And so there's just a lot of little things that were like this black box that I started to figure out over time it was like me going to college in real estate.
Interesting. I mean, that first hurdle, what so many people get caught up in too, that I see is like, they follow that 1 or 2% rule that you mentioned. And that's the Bible. As an engineer, like logical brain thinking is like, okay, cool. Now I know the metric and I just need to go find it. And so they end up going to Iowa. They end up going to Nebraska and trying to find these $100,000, $200,000 houses that they can rent for $2,000 and get caught up there, where you chose to go. I still want to invest in my backyard. I still want something close, probably because you thought it was safer, probably because you're like, I want to be able to go over to it. And so many training wheels there. It's so smart that a first-time investor investing in their backyard, knowing their backyard is so critical and understanding what's going on. And especially like, I love single family for the first time investors because you learn so much, like you said, management, like how to write a lease. Like, what does a lease look like? A true lease to someone I don't know. And like, how do I do a background check? Okay. How many times should I drive by the property? Do I need a property manager? Like all these things you had to learn by doing. And I think that's huge is exemplary from your college decisions to your electrical decisions to your engineer, all these different things that you just learned by doing. And this is no different than the same steps you made before. So after this single family, so now you have a long-term rental, you have your primary home there with Kendra. I guess what was the next step? Was it more, did you now get addicted to the single family and follow that route, or where did you go from here?
So then I was kind of, searching for that next deal. I was looking on the MLS. And my background in selling cars and stuff, I was still on Craigslist a lot. So I found a duplex in Vancouver on Craigslist for sale by owner. And I was like, man, this is going to be weird.
That's amazing.
I barely know how to buy real estate, and it's a for sale by owner. And I didn't really have an agent. So I contacted the guy and I was like, hey, so what's this look like if I, want to buy this? And he's like, well, we'll cut out agent costs so I can sell it cheaper to you. I'm like, I love that. How do we make that work? So he's like, I'm not really sure, but if you want to figure that out, it can save you some money. So I went down to the local title company and was like, hey, I want to buy this duplex. What do I do? And they were like, hey, fill out this agreement form. They wouldn't give me an agreement because there's some kind of legality there. So
yeah.
I just started searching for an agreement. I found some and so I don't recommend doing it the way I did. I got online and found some agreement from some random place. There's ones online you can buy that are legit for your state that you're in. But we wrote it up, and I look back at this one today and still kind of laugh at some of the stuff that's in there. But yeah, we came to agreement. I think he was asking $319, or he was asking $326. I got him down to $319. Purchased this duplex. we had been living in our Tigard home, which is my wife. She loved this house. Great area, Bull Mountain and Tigard. And I'm like 8 months in, we just did a full kitchen remodel, got everything updated to where we want it. And I'm like, hey babe, I just found this duplex that we need to move into. Like, where is it? I'm like, it's in Vancouver. And I'm showing her pictures of this. She's like, I'm not moving into this house. Like, no way. So I'm like, well, I think this is a good move for our family. It gets us closer to relatives and stuff up north for, having kids. We just had our first kid. We hadn't had our first kid, but we were just about to start having our first kid or trying for our first kid. And we knew that, Portland traffic's awful. It could be 2 hours to go see relatives, or it could be an hour and 20 minutes. Like it. And so bought that, started renovating it prior to moving in, and then got it painted, moved there. And first night we living at the house, my wife's car gets broken into.
Oh God.
Window gets smashed out, glove box is open. And I'm like, this is not helping my cause.
No, not a bit.
Come to find out, we talked to some neighbors. This never happens in that neighborhood. And it was just a party. Some guys got kicked out and they were mad. And I was like, obviously she's like, yeah, sure. Trying to make up a story. But no, that one, we renovated it. Our side got it fixed up. And then I talked to the tenant next door and was like, hey, do you have any 4-day week or like a 4-day weekend trips that you're planning to do in the near future? I'd love to kind of like, redo your floors and paint this thing when you're gone. And so we did that over a few different weekends. She was gone and renovated it while she was in there. And she liked it because she got a newer unit. But that one's kind of where I got really my feet wet in the renovations. Like I've always been handy. I did all the work myself on those two units, which gained a lot more sweat equity.
Oh yeah, that's makes a huge difference. So let me ask you, like, it sounds like you walked your way sort of like gingerly and methodically into residential real estate investing. What were some of your biggest fears, and did they ever come to fruition?
Same type of fears that kind of pop up, I think, with jumping careers, or like there's a certain amount of you're kind of don't want to steer your household wrong in the wrong direction. My wife trusts me with the financial stuff, and so we're putting out a lot of money on these the duplex and the first single family that we bought. And so yeah, there's a fear of what happens if I get in this investment and then another 2008 happens. I think that was in the back of my head, is what happens if another 2008 happens? And real estate at that time was starting to get hot. Like we had gone through multiple offers on homes trying to get our first home that we got in Tigard and gotten bait out. So Matt was like, man, what if a crash happens? And so that was in the back of my head always, of if that happens, then what's it look like? And I don't know. I'm definitely a very risk tolerant person. Even when we bought that duplex, like I remember buying the duplex and then being like, babe, don't buy groceries this week. Like we don't have enough money at that time I didn't have any credit cards. So it was pretty much cash and debit card account. That was all I had. I was told just not to have credit cards. And so there was a few times where it's like, okay, yeah, we can't go on this trip. We can't buy groceries this week until our paychecks come in from our W-2 job that were every other week. So, but I think I look back on those times and I kind of laugh at it. I'm like, it was kind of fun, and it was almost kind of exciting in a way to kind of be living on the edge a little bit. But also we were very frugal people. Didn't drive new cars, old cars. And so I was always told as an electrician, hey, this job can be very up and down, and don't ever, go beyond your means of what you can afford on unemployment. And so that's kind of the way I live my life going forward. And it wasn't the unemployment side of things. It was just, don't go beyond what I can afford in my bills. So I didn't want to have car payments. I didn't want to have any extra payments other than the mortgages, that place I needed to live, and, the payments on the houses that were hopefully being paid by a tenant.
That's incredible. That's a really, really large amount of discipline. And I think that this is what I always I know we don't know each other well. I co-founded a nationwide transaction management company. And so we've done over close to 1,000 creative transactions nationwide between all of the team that's transacted there. And this is one thing that I definitely see is a reoccurring pattern with folks that purchase creatively. They have no self-control with money. They don't understand how to live below their means, so that they can hedge against when something inevitably does happen. So the fact that you kind of always had that in the back of your mind and that always sort of kept you in your bumper lane allowed you to keep growing in a way that you were comfortable with, but also it was always there. Like that's what I'm gathering from what you're saying is like that was always something you were open with about like with your wife. And it's huge because when people get into buying creatively, you don't need cash, you don't need credit. Well, guess what? They don't have cash, they don't have credit. And it gets really hard because when you scale and one thing goes wrong, it's really tough. It's hard, it's hard to hold those properties.
Well, it's just, it kind of goes back to the same thing is like, you know, if you're bad with money and you win $10 million, you're probably you're not going to do much with that money. You're going to lose all that money because you never were good with money when you had $100 in your bank account. And so you see a lot of these people go broke. And I think, you know, the creative side of things of being able, if I was, you know, I would have done really well if I had creative available to me and I knew how it worked back then, because I probably would have scaled very quickly and the economy would have, you know, rewarded me for that at the time. But if you go to do that recklessly and get too much and overextend yourself, man, you could go bankrupt really quickly too. And
very quickly. We've seen it happen so often. Danielle and I have we've sold some deals to some buyers who scaled way too quickly and went ass over tea kettle and got foreclosed on upwards of 100 properties. And so it's very quickly you can fall into that trap of developing a system and buying into it when you don't have the cash, you don't have the credit, and you think you have it all figured out, and you're not taking those calculated risks. It's so freaking true for anyone that's investing. It's you're investing, there's risk involved, and you need to be able to absorb when that risk goes down. Like you just do. It's different than a stock where the stock prices go up and down. Real estate does too, but then issues come up. I mean, it happens, especially as you scale. Like I can tell you right now, over the past 3 months, I've probably spent out of, you know, our little fund that we have, probably about 12 grand in repairs, water bills, sewer leaks, other various things at various properties that I own that were not I didn't plan to do that. I didn't want to do that. That is just a part of it. And you have to plan and take that into account. It's not as if that just magically resolves itself. It's so critical.
Yep. And I think that's getting the building blocks of investing is right now there's, you know, that with the creative, it gives you the ability to jump multiple steps ahead where if you don't have your building blocks of putting away CapEx and putting or accounting for vacancy and that kind of stuff, like you get into these properties and, you know, you can have that, you know, oh crap fund when stuff like that's going wrong. You can get yourself into problems. And so I think it's got to be a calculated way of how you grow. And I think I was forced to because I was putting in the money. So I would have to build, you know, I did the Burr method. I'd fix up one, I'd refinance it, pull cash out, and then on to the next one. So it was a slow process. And in a way, it taught me a lot of good lessons. I don't think you have to go that route, but I think that you should really educate yourself through books and watching your guys' podcasts and watching other podcasts and learn from other people's mistakes and not just be like, I'm going full this direction and buying everything out there. You got to be smart about it.
You do. And what's cool is listening to your evolvement and growth is, and I can't wait to dive into these apartments and multifamily of what you did, but like through this journey, what I'm hearing, like the denominator of everything I'm hearing right now is that you personally grew through the experiences, the failures, the successes, the building blocks. You're talking about just stacking skills that entrepreneurship and real estate investing and business buying and all these things are the greatest personal development tool of all time, because you start learning who you are, your risk tolerances, all those various things that you want to get into, all the while how conservative you are and how risky you really want to be. And so that's what's really cool too about real estate investing is that you get to figure out who you are, what you, like you touched on earlier, what makes you happy, what you want to do. And so now you have a duplex, you have a single family rental. At what point did you graduate and make a massive leap? Because I think your first big move was to a 20 unit. Is that correct?
No. My first big one is I kind of bought a 5-unit mobile home park and a 5-unit apartment building about the same time. I was starting to analyze properties, and I was just like, this was 2018-ish, I would say. And I was just analyzing properties. I'm just like, man, these just don't make a lot of sense on paper. And so I was like, what's the next thing, like economy of scale? So I'm like, I'm going to start looking at these other ones and start looking at, okay, these ones start making more sense. The cash flow is better. per dollar put in. So my cash on cash is getting better. So I'm going to start looking at these ones. I happened to be driving through a neighborhood one day and I saw a for sale sign on I think it was like a 4 unit, because at that time I was still like looking at 1 to 4 units. And so I called on it and the agent's like, no, it's a condo. But she's like, hey, I've got a 5 unit apartment building that's coming on market here soon. Are you interested in something like that? And I was like, oh man, that seems, yeah, sure. Why not? I'll look at it. So she sends it over. They were asking about $350 for it. And I immediately, fear again comes in. I'm like, okay, so 5 units. I buy 5 units. What if 2 tenants leave right away? And I'm stuck with 2 renovations. Well, in my small mind, I'm like, I can't be in 2 places at once. I can't renovate these units, because to that point, I'd done all my own work. But I wasn't thinking of, well, I could just hire a contractor to do it if the numbers make sense. And so that was another breakthrough, and I didn't do it until later. So in that one, I had the down payment for the property.
Was it your money, or did you have a private money investor?
I had a private money at that one, and I was pulling money in for that one. But the problem was I had fear still. I was like, okay, I can't do this. So I had a buddy that I had met. He was actually my agent on our first house when we moved to Tigard. He was doing real estate investing as well. I said, hey, I've got this deal. I've got the down payment. I've got everything. Do you want to partner with me? How would you feel if I came to you, Len, and said, I have a 5 unit. I'm bringing all the funds. Will you be 50% partner with me?
Yeah, all day.
So out of fear, I did that. And we did it. We renovated units. I think we renovated all 5 units, me and him. We'd take vacation days, do it on our weekends. And I think in 18 months, we pushed that thing up like around $200,000, cashed out, paid off the private money lender, pulled some cash out for ourselves. That one's, doubled or more than doubled since then. But out of fear of me just not knowing the unknown, I pulled him in. And so I lost out on, half of the potential upside of that property.
Do you still have it?
Yep. Still have that property, still partners. And
wow, you took a risk, but still, like, you still have it. You still have a good partnership. Like that's a success.
Yeah.
Yep. For sure. And he's one of my good friends too. Like just a down to earth guy. And, we bounce ideas back and forth. He was like the only person I knew in real estate up until last year. I'd never gone to any meetups or anything. He was the guy that I'd call and be like, hey, like, how's it going in real estate? And so, yeah, it was, we kind of developed a good relationship there as well.
Interesting. That's pretty cool. I did not know that, Ryan. I thought you had been more entrenched in it, and to see now what you're doing in the community that's around you and the meetups you're going to and how you're speaking at them, and it's cool to see the evolvement, because I know how much you love to learn, but also how much you love to educate and help others in the same position you were when you first started out. And so going to these meetups and giving back to your local communities too is such a big thing for you. And it's cool to be able to share those experiences of the training wheels and the failures and all the things that you've learned along the way. Oh man, like I can't even imagine if I walk into a meetup, know nothing, and you're the one taking us through the steps you've made, sharing your story right here of what you've sacrificed, the decision you had to make, and balancing a wife, balancing moving a job, and like all these different things along the way. It's real. That is real life and getting started. And that's what's really cool.
Yeah. I kind of always had this, I don't know if it's in bad mindset, but I had the mindset of like, I don't want to share my successes with everybody around me because it can change relationships in your family and friends around you.
Yeah.
And I think, I got to thank you for getting me into like the sub 2 community, because it's a very tight community and everybody's open about sharing and helping each other. And I think it's what I was missing. But helping the people around you is I think where you get a lot of reward from just helping people that are below you. And I think, you help that person that's 2 steps behind you. And as you get farther, there's going to be more steps behind you. So you help the guy that's 2 steps behind you. Hopefully they can help the person 2 steps behind you. Because as you get bigger, you start to forget about the things that were holding you up at that level. And so you want to be like, you at a certain level, you're going to get to a point where you're not helping out that beginner. You might have courses that can kind of help them through it, but the person who relates to them the most is somebody who's 2 steps ahead of them. And they know that that's a very fresh concept in their mind of what they're feeling. Because I think a lot of when it comes down to real estate investing, like we were talking earlier, being the risk is it's a lot of what you're feeling in that moment, and you kind of forget that feeling as you level up, and so you can't relate as much.
Yeah.
So 1 year ago, you were not going to any meetups. 1 year ago?
Yep.
And now you're in multiple mentorships.
Mm-hmm.
So what did the last year look like for you?
So I went to my first real estate meetup, and I mean, that's when I realized like that's what I'd been missing. Like if I would have started going to real estate meetups, like when I first started, I would have leveled up it would probably been 10 times as fast, because you start to realize you get around people and you're speaking the same language as somebody. And I think Pace talks about that is, I think all of us and as an entrepreneur, you speak two languages. You speak your primary language and you speak entrepreneur with somebody, and you resonate with people who speak the same language as you. And I didn't even realize that. I remember messaging somebody in my local community. I was kind of getting on Facebook trying to reach out to kind of figure out where meetups were happening. And I messaged this guy. He was kind of top of the community. And I said, hey, I've kind of got this feeling like I'm on an island by myself in my real estate investing. I've done this, kind of like I've scaled up, but I feel empty because nobody around me. I can't relate to my family. They've told me you're working too hard. I can't relate to my friends because you go hang out with them and their problems are just, who lost on Sunday at whatever sport and, what's happening in their job. And I want to talk about higher level stuff and where you're going in that vision, because I'm not ordinary. I'm different. And I think that's what I learned is you have to get around people who have that vision and are thinking the same way you do, and you will it just fills your cup. Like, I mean, it's amazing. So yeah, I've like blossomed in the last year, just meeting people, and I'm very excited to see what the next 5 years will bring with those relationships and the networking that's come from it.
So these days, what does your day-to-day life comprise of? What do you do for work? How do you pay the bills? What kind of investments do you have? What are you working on?
So yes, I got out of my W-2 about 4 years ago. My day-to-day now I'm reshaping what that looks like right now. I just joined the owners club through Pace Morby, and he kind of has like time blocking. I think it's something that I was not very good at up until recently. And I'm starting to kind of block out my time. So that's an evolving thing that's happening right now specifically. And I'm kind of starting to block out my time for, the activities that I'm getting into RV parks. So I'm blocking out some times for calling RV parks. I'm starting to do social media. Like I've watched him grow, and I'm like, I'm going to start, because it's kind of selfish for me to hold all this information to myself and not get it out there so other people can hear or see something that maybe kind of fills that gap that they're missing. So yeah, I'm starting to put that there. So I'm going outside of my box. Like getting on a podcast is not my norm. I get nervous about it. This is my second one. My first one was super nervous, but it's getting easier. And that's what I'm noticing is I just signed up for my first speech at like a real estate meetup, and I'm nervous about that. But it's that, pushing forward a little bit farther out of your comfort zone, and then, continuing to go. But as far as like what replaced my income, I did a 20-unit apartment building in 2021. That was the one that was kind of the turning point, the tipping point for everything. I was still working at W-2. I tried to buy this thing initially. All right, so I'll back up. So I saw it online. Was going to call the owner on it. It was a for sale by owner, and kind of chickened out. Just was like, man, this is way too big. Again, fear got in the way, and it went pending. And I was like, dang, okay, so that one's gone. And it popped back online. I'm going to call the owner. So I called him. Didn't have the down payment for the property, but I had $150,000 HELOC, and it was a $1.6 million property. So I needed about $250,000 for that property. So I asked him if he'd carry back, the $250 of the down payment, and I'll bring the other $150 for the $400,000 down payment. And he was like, I want to meet for lunch. And so we met for lunch, and kind of had a conversation. He liked me. He's like, I see the same drive I used to have. And so he's like, let's do it. So we closed on that property. I quit the same day I closed on that property. My second son was born 3 days later. So I was in the hospital, like onboarding everybody in my property management software. My wife's sleeping, my kid's sleeping, and I'm just sitting there like stressed, like running through, you know, all this stuff. I'm like, what did I just get myself into? I've got a newborn baby. And I just remember realizing, like, you've got this. Like, I just kind of had that like conversation with myself, like, you've got this. You've done this every step of the way along the way. This is just another step to kind of push forward, and you'll figure it out. And in 5 years, I learned that I remembered back to my first single family home and that fear I had. And then looking back at it 2 years later and be like, what was I worried about? And that's what got me through at that point, is I was like, I'm going to look back at this in 2 years and be like, what were you worried about? And so I think that's what got me through that night, is I was like, I've got this. It's going to work out. I've got the skills. I've built up the skills. I've got the knowledge. I've kind of built up contacts. I kind of start working with contractors at that point. So I was like, I'll figure this out. And so it ended up working out. I mean, again, the fear of quitting your job and having that security of your job was, it was a weird mindset that I had to get through. And I lost my insurance at the same time. My wife was still working, so I could jump on her insurance, but it was kind of expensive. So I got my own. But yeah, no, it was a crazy time, but that one allowed me to quit my job with the cash flow.
Nice. That's amazing.
But yeah, I mean, going forward, that one, I renovated the units on those ones as I turned over. I did the first one myself, and then I was like, that's about the time I stepped away and said, okay, I can't do this and keep scaling. It was an hour and a half away. So I got a team and started renovating units. The first one I did went way overboard. I think we spent $25,000 on a studio renovation, because I was thinking of how I was renovating houses. And then when you get to these smaller apartments and the area, you didn't have to do a full kitchen remodel. You didn't have to do all the nice upgrades. You just had to do a basic upgrade that met the area of what the need was. And so I honed that in and then renovated more units. I think I renovated 10 of those units over about 18 months. And then I started my refinance process on that one, and I pushed it up $1.1 million over about 18 months, and then cashed out my original $400,000 that I put as a down payment and an extra $250,000. So I cashed out $650,000 out of the building.
Whoa.
So that was like a wow moment for me. And I was like, okay, this is proven concept now, and what's the next step? So
what is the next step for you?
So that was back in May of 2023. And then I started looking for my next deal, and I found a 27 unit up in that same area. It was a quarter mile away from that 20 unit. And it's kind of funny, this 27 unit was actually on market in 2020 prior to me buying that 20 unit. And fear kind of got my way then, and it ended up getting sold. But then I saw it pop back on market. Well, at this time, I knew exactly what rents needed to be. I knew I had the contractors, everybody in place. I knew what the renovation. So I underwrote that deal, and they were asking $2.2 million for it. And I underwrote it. I'm like, I can push this thing up to around $3.4 million in less than 2 years. So I was like, I'm gonna do this. So I put an offer in on the place. There was 4 people that walked it. So I just said, okay, I was like, I really want this place because I know what I can push it up in a short amount of time. Put a full price offer, $2.2 million, and it got accepted. And so then that night I went to my wife and said, hey babe, we just got an offer accepted on a 27 unit apartment building. And she's like, awesome. But she's like, we're leaving to go on a 6-week camping trip in Southern Utah in 2 weeks. Like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I think I'll figure it out. And so I ended up, I bought a Starlink and bought some lithium batteries and an inverter, installed that there, because I was like, I can do this remotely, because we planned to boondock half the time and then stay in parks where we'd have internet half the time. But I was like, okay, I solved that problem. So I was like, okay, now I just need to get the inspection done before we leave. And kind of with inspectors on larger commercial buildings, what they do is they'll inspect about 1/3 of the units, and they'll kind of, give you a general overview of what it is. My take on it is I want to see every unit myself. And one reason I want to do that is I want to go in and I want to make an inventory list of everything that needs to be fixed. So I Yeah, I inspected all 27 units, well, minus one because they weren't available. But I inspected 26 of the units, got lists of like what was wrong for each unit. And then I would take videos of the units. So when I have a turnover coming up, I can look at that video and be like, oh, this is going to be a big turnover. They had pets or they were smokers. So it kind of gives me just that baseline of like, okay, what am I getting into when they move out of here? So got the inspections all done, did the negotiations. On the 20 unit, I didn't have an agent to broker that deal between me and the seller. We just did that all off market. But on this one, I used an agent, which was saving grace. If you're ever trying to do something from afar, I would recommend having an agent in place to kind of just deal with everything. So yeah, we went on our trip at that point to Southern Utah, and I was kind of, getting the bank loans in place, running through some other inspections that came up, like there's a foundation inspection, dealing with the appraiser, and got close to the finish line with the bank that we were using. And they're like, hey, Ryan, your global cash flow is not high enough to purchase this property. And I was like, what is global cash flow? I mean, it kind of makes sense like in my head, but I wanted to confirm, like, what's global cash flow? And they're like, you're the money you make to what your debt is we want it to be around 1.25 and you're around like a 1.17. They're like, if you had one more apartment building under your belt of doing this, we probably could let that slide, but you're still kind of a little newer into these larger apartment buildings. So I'm like, oh crap. Okay. So I got to figure out this problem now that, I hadn't even thought of coming up, because I'm like, I'm retired now, don't have a job. I was like, did I mess up? Should I have not quit? I was like, no, I'm making plenty of money at this point. I said, I just need to figure out how to do this. So I got a hold of another bank, told them kind of what my problem was, and got close to the finish line. And the same thing came up, was the global cash flow. And I was like, okay. And that's about the time, I think it was about end of November. And I was like, I'm going to try to wholesale this apartment building because I think it's a great deal. So I put the apartment building online. I think I posted it in sub 2 a little bit. I think Landon, you probably saw it at one point.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And then the agent or the broker and the guy that I was trying to use for the second loan was like, Ryan, you should buy this property. Like, this is an amazing deal. This is the best cash flowing property I've seen come across my desk in the last 2 years. They're like, you should figure out how to make this happen. So around that time, I had made a connection on Facebook to a guy that had hard money. Like, I had never used hard money. I didn't really know how it worked, but I had an appraisal. I had the inspection, the environmental done, and all of the documentations for the profit and loss on this. So I sent this over to a hard money lender on December 20th, and he was like, yeah, this is amazing. And we ended up closing that deal 9 days later with hard money at like 11.5%. And it was a hard pill to swallow when you're looking at like $16,000 interest payments a month on a larger building like that. But it's all calculated into the cash flow and your numbers. So if you've nailed down your numbers, it makes sense. I think at that time the property was grossing around $24,000 a month. And so I think with the expenses, I think I was making about $4,000 a month. And what I started doing then is I started stair-stepping my rent increases to my tenants. Like I did about 10 the first month, 10 the second month, 10 the third month. And then I enacted like utility surcharges on them as well. Started raising. Well, then we kind of had like a natural just trickle of, one or two would move out per month, and then we would renovate those units. And kind of we went down that road, and 18 months later, I guess it is now, I'm working on the refinance on that building. Just got the appraisal done, and it appraised at 3.76 million. So it pushed it up about 1.5 million in the last 18 months.
That's incredible. So I can totally relate to that hard pill up front, but macro level perspective of this actually works. It's just gonna suck for a little while. That's all.
Yep. The next biggest problem to solve, and there's always a way around it, and that's where the networking comes in. Is the larger your network is, the easier it is to solve every problem, because somebody has probably dealt with it, or they know somebody that's dealt with it.
So what's the next year look like for you in terms of your asset classes you're looking at? Because you've done the multifamily, you've done the mobile home parks, you've done single family, small multifamily. What does the next year look like for you, and how can people reach out and help you?
Yeah, I'm kind of switching gears right now, partially because I don't get the fulfillment of helping my community. I think part of me, like after quitting my job, I had about a year of trying to figure out like what's going to make me truly happy. And I want to figure out a way to like impact my local community somehow. I think joining owners club, they kind of force you to kind of get that mind shift of like, figure out what you want. And so I'm kind of shifting gears right now towards RV parks and kind of through like, I want to go down like the affordable housing and provide affordable housing. And I think RV parks are kind of the easiest way that I can kind of pivot, still using some of my underwriting skills and everything from multifamily and moving into RV parks. And so I kind of want to be like, I want to do affordable community driven RV parks where it's not only just an RV park, but you are creating a community within that RV park. And I kind of want to structure the deal where I kind of want to sell off the lots to the individual people that are there through either lease options, to where they actually own part of the company essentially, and they'll still pay rent to the lot to go back to the company, but they're going to still own that lot, and it'll come back to them through profits to the company. And that way, over time, they're as that thing appreciates, they're going to make money. And I think it's a scalable thing that I can do with RV parks to allow it to give, the American dream of somebody owning something where they live, but on a small scale. And so, yeah, I'm in talks with one RV park in my hometown, and kind of looking to, underwrite or help other people that want to get into RV parks in other areas. But yeah, I'm in Washington State, so in the Northwest is kind of where I'm looking.
That's great. So if people want to reach out to you and find you, do you prefer email? Do you prefer social media? Or do you want to drive people?
I would say social media would probably be the best. Probably Instagram. It's Buyin_Ryan. So BUYIN_Ryan on Instagram. Reach out, and like, I'd love to kind of help people, at any point of your journey, if it's that first single family home, just mindset, or like how to, underwrite. I'm starting to put out more content right now, a little bit on mindset, but kind of, in the multifamily space as well. But my biggest thing is like, if you DM me with a question, I'm likely going to make a reel about that question. I'm not going to call anybody out on it, but I'm going to make a reel about it, because if you have that question, a ton of people behind you have that question as well. And so I feel like the most reach I can have and the most people I can help is through social media, which is not I don't like social media, but it's a necessary evil to help people. And I feel like that's what I'm kind of changing my mindset around right now, and doing podcasts and speaking with people, which is definitely pushing me to that next level, where I never thought that I would be speaking at a real estate meetup, a year ago. But now I'm like, okay, now I just signed up for one in August, and this is the next step.
That's great, man. Your story needs to be heard, and definitely people need to reach out to you with not only just questions too, but also opportunities to partner with you on deals and private money lending opportunities for you too, to get a part of RV parks. That's the greatest way to learn too, that a lot of people on our deals too, well, they go, I don't have the time, but I want to learn how you invest just in a single family, a sober living house, or something that may be, and they can come bring that money and be a part of the deal and learn while they earn interest on their money too. And so I know that you offer those things as well. And so definitely reach out to Ryan if you guys need help with anything, and loved his journey. Show him some love, please. And thanks, Ryan. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thank you guys for having me. Really appreciate it.
Sweet. Let's end it.